we need to propose it.
Okay, so it is saying the little light is saying you are live, so I'm going to assume we are live. Hey everyone, welcome to SFF180, and I'm here with the awesome Whitney. Thank you for joining me this early. And if you remember, I have no idea what we're looking at in terms of like viewers and what have you, but okay. Now live on the channel. So if you remember, we were at Glasgow Worldcon on an unusually sunny day that afternoon and sat outside and had a couple of rough takes, but we did our little video where we assigned ourselves some books. We did a TBR takeover. We literally conceptualized it that afternoon, and like within the hour we went out. Oh wait, there's something like that. I mean, it was very quickly. Yeah. So yeah, and so we just went out, did it impromptu, and so that's just how we work in BookTube. So how you doing, Whitney?
Yeah. I'm doing good. Just, excited to find out about what your thoughts are on these books.
Yeah. And we're not going to, this is not going to be a long one, maybe like an hour tops. We're going to just get going on this. I gave you 3 titles. You gave me 3. Now, my 3 titles, admittedly, there's like one new book and that I assigned you, and then which I actually have not. I've just started it, so I'm only like a few chapters into it. So, but then another were some like vintage titles that I've read, but it's been like forever. But then you gave me, I think, one newish title and a couple of vintage titles that either I had not read or like one of them was forever ago. So we're gonna like do this like in a non-spoilery way, just because, if we like stuff, we want you guys to read it too, and don't want to give away the entire farm. So there's that. And Whitney has a little cuddle bug in her lap. So
yeah, this is my puppy Pico. He's sleepy today. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I feel you, puppy. I totally do. So, all right, now it's unusual to have a morning stream, but thank you all for joining us, and let everyone else know if there's a little share button around. Be like, hey, folks. So, otherwise, we're gonna get into it. Do you want to start, Whitney, or do you want to do it the way we did it in Scotland?
Sure. Why not? Ready?
1,
2, 3. Oh no.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
All right. You go ahead and go.
Are you sure?
Yeah. You go ahead and go. So.
All right. All right. So, one of the books that you recommended to me was Icehenge.
Yes.
By Stanley Robinson, which is actually the only physical copy book that I have.
Yeah.
This is one of the Tour Essentials re-releases that came out.
Yeah, it's very nice edition.
Actually not that thick. I remember when you assigned it to me, I was really worried that this was going to be one of those epic big boys.
Yeah, like it was going to be a Kim Stanley Robinson book.
Yeah. I was so worried that this was going to be a huge thing, and I'm like, can I get this done on time? What are you doing to me, Thomas? What are you doing? So I had like sort of vaguely been familiar with this book, but I don't know, it's just one you don't hear about very often. So I went into it with kind of unknown expectations, I must say. And this story was very interesting because the first section of it really deals with a character who gets caught up in a Martian revolution for freedom against the Earth. Which is very reminiscent of our history, but still futuristic enough to be very believable. And then it kind of shifts into the discovery of an Icehenge on Pluto and why it's there and who put it there and what the purpose of this was. And then those two kinds of halves of the story kind of connect at the end. And I gotta say, like, for Kim Stanley Robinson, there wasn't a whole lot of ecological discussion, a little bit, but not a ton. And this was a very interesting, like, you can see the reminiscent glimmer of what he's going to write in the future, but it was a very different story for Kim Stanley Robinson. I freaking loved it. Yay. I do have to say that I loved the beginning and the Martian Revolution a whole lot more than the second half of the book, although I think the ending saved it for me.
Yeah.
So I really had a good time with this. Obviously I'm really happy that I went out and bought it, and I love the Tour Essentials version of it.
Yeah.
You don't pay me to say that. I just actually love those.
Yeah.
And
It's a good line of books to have, isn't it? I think not enough science fiction publishers right now. Well, of course, there's Galant's Masterworks, but that's like in a class by itself. But there aren't a lot of publishers out there like really giving a dang about this vast backlist of books that the whole genre's had for decades and decades and decades, right? They're just thousands and thousands of books just slip into obscurity, and a lot of them don't deserve it. And so I'm glad to just see somebody out there doing it, you know?
I agree. I agree. And I think a lot of works would be lost without it. So I definitely want to support them in a lot of these older works. I don't know. I do like me some vintage science fiction, I guess. But I don't know if I would call this one vintage, but it definitely was lost to the test of time for sure. I do have to say, I'm really surprised because I got out of the beginning of this book what I wanted from his book Red Mars. It was a lot more of a personal story, and I don't know. I didn't expect the twisty ending that I got here. So
yeah, Red Mars is super dense on all the politicking and all of it, and it's just sort of like if you kind of, I mean, that's the famous trilogy. But I always tell people, if you do not make that your first KSR. Because it is going to be like it's just very daunting and can put you off. So good. Well, hooray! So I'm glad you enjoyed it. So we're at least like 1 for 3 in terms of enjoyment for Whitney.
Well, real quick, is this your favorite Kim Stanley Robinson book?
Oh, I would not say it's my favorite. No, I mean I do like it, and like you just said, you can look at it and see kind of him forming some ideas that as he went on in his career, he would do more with. And so you can kind of see the seeds of all of that. And I think that's fun to see, like, a writer kind of developing their identity, the themes that they're going to be, they're going to be their, favorite themes. And you're right. He doesn't really get super, super hard into the Echo stuff until like he's doing books like 50 Signs of Rain. And I think some of maybe like the, Pacific Edge. I think some, he'll get into that later on in much more depth and dedication, but you see those little glimmers of it, and so that's why I think it's worth reading. That's why I think everyone should, and it's a good way, like you said, you can kind of dip your toe into his work if you want to, if you've never read him before, because it's a average sized book. It's not too not too daunting, and so it's worth it. So
yeah, I don't know if I would recommend it as a first book, because it doesn't cover the themes that he usually covers. You might be surprised by his other work if that's your very first one. And I don't know. I have to say my favorite Kim Stanley Robinson so far is definitely Ministry of the Future.
Ministry of the Future? No. Okay. Yeah, well, the first one of his that I read would have been, and again, very different, would have been The Wild Shore, but then I read that when it came out, so I could be a very young teenager or something. It's something about that. And that's kind of a post-apocalyptic scenario. And it's the first. Favorite? Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, it was my discovery of him. I think that I've since come on to, enjoy some others later, later books better as he develops. But there was something, I think, about that particular one that sort of hit me where I lived when I was a kid. Because, the characters are these, kind of sort of young boys and living in this very kind of post-war situation. And they kind of have their teenage boy adventures in which go awry. So I guess there was that aspect of it. But no, I later on, like books like Red Moon and 2140 and sort of Ministry for the Future in particular, I think, are ones where he's really just, cooking on all cylinders. So it's, I agree. So I would agree with you on that one. All right. So shall I go?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Well, since, all right. So I'm going to go with something, I guess, similarly vintage and also starts with an I, because this was the one that you had me, but come on that way, Thomas. There we go. And here are the stars. Jim Hogan. Now this is, now I told you when you wanted me to read this that I had, again, little Thomas tried to read this. I don't think I got it at the time, or at least I got some bits of it. As I recall, I probably may have DNF'd it at that young age because it's so sciencey, right?
Yeah.
And now that's, of course, what I dig about it now. Now, Jim Hogan is sort of a problematic individual, to put mildly, as the later course of his career got into. Although I can see some seeds of that in this book, but we'll get to that in a minute. But what I do like about this is it is the kind of hard, like capital H hard science fiction nobody's publishing anymore. I mean, this is strictly about scientists sciencing things, right? I mean, it's neat. Like it is and I think that he really does, for all that it's kind of yakety yak and almost very much like reads very much like a piece of nonfiction, actually, just because it's reams of just expedition about this guy did this and then went over to this lab, and after testing all of this and that and the other thing, they did this and found this, and then he sent the information on to Houston where this happened, and he kept going and going in that vein. But there's something about it that really did kind of communicate, see, this is why science is cool. It's like being, space detectives, right? We're presented with a mystery. Now we have to solve the mystery. And he really does go about that whole process and how meticulous it is. And there are a couple of little jumps where he, for author's convenience, he'll just kind of be like, and then this happened. But for the most part, I just like that kind of approach. I was doing a little bit of kind of back research as I was reading this, and apparently he wrote that book on a bet. Some of his friends, he's from the UK. He had just seen, and I saw this coming because I was reading it going, boy, I can really see. Yes, it's very much George. It was like, it's very, very Thomas Dolby, science. The whole, he had just seen 2001. And was kind of like, well, the ending was all kind of trippy, and so his friends were like, well, try to do 2001 better, or not like that. And so they said, we bet you can. So he had several friends all bet him £5, and he wrote the book.
What was the bet? The
bet was, he enjoyed kind of like that cold scientific future in the movie 2001, but then it kind of got like super mystical in the whole kind of like space portal sequence. Which, by the way, Arthur C. Clarke was like not a huge fan of when he saw the movie. That's another discussion entirely, because he and Kubrick were like doing the same kind of doing it in tandem, but Clarke went one way and Kubrick did Kubrick. But he said, I like this whole general idea of this, this notion that there's something out there that's bigger that we're part of, right? Mm-hmm. And so they challenged him to write the book and bet him £5. And so he wrote the book. I guess he made more £5, but according to one of the sources I found, may have even been like the Wikipedia page. He later on met Clarke, and they were talking, and he said, yes, well, your ending made more sense, but my ending made more money. So, so there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. I probably didn't mean it as a cut down, but it's just sort of like, that the way the cookie crumbles in the world. So I did really, but I did enjoy it. I mean, for all that it was just, I think the brevity helped. It's like 200 pages or something. So you just have this sort of scientific investigation coming on. And then you have like the Hercule Poirot scene at the end where it's like in all the Agatha Christie mysteries, Poirot kind of gathers all the suspects into the room. And he kind of like tells the story, and then, and this kind of happens in the book too, where you have the main scientist character gets everybody together on like some video conference call and then tells the story, and figures out the whole big cosmic mystery. And it was, you can see the seeds of the kind of later fascination with pseudoscience that sort of, I think, derailed Hogan later in his career. The seeds of that are kind of there because he later on, he got into the writings of this crank guy from the 70s. I don't know where he came from, but there's a fellow named Immanuel Velikovsky. And Velikovsky had this theory about the formation of the solar system that he called astrocatastrophism. And it's literally... it's like planets flying around and bouncing off each other like pinballs and then eventually settling into their orbits. And it's kind of as goofy as it sounds. Isaac Asimov wrote a whole thing making fun of it. But
sounds like that's right to be made fun of.
Yeah, it is as,
yeah.
but But you see that in kind of like how the resolution a little bit. It's like
I kind of disagree.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the hard parts about early science fiction is that, while it's true that a lot of these people weren't awesome like people, I have kind of given up researching these people because you're just bound to be disappointed. So I try to just embrace the stories for what they are. One of the reasons why I recommend this book to so many people is it represents to me what I love so much about the golden age science fiction. It's very hopeful. They present a problem that seems impossible. Then they use science to try to solve that problem in a way that at least could genuinely make some logical types of sense or potentially be possible, even though some of it is not, but let's pretend. And then you get this very clever, creative, fun ending, which is a little bit of suspend your disbelief, granted. But I did not compare this one to 2001 Space Odyssey at all, at least not for me, because there's no big dumb object. We don't have, I just really liked that it was a fun in the solar system sort of, I don't know, golden age style book that I don't know anything about this author. This was like a random pickup on my second bookshop, haul. I just randomly grabbed it because I loved that cover. And I was just so inspired by the ending. And what's even better is I really liked the second book also. It really seems to really enhance the story. It doesn't suffer from middle book syndrome. It's not him trying to sell more books. He actually genuinely had part of the story he wanted to continue to tell. But he kind of loses it in the third book. I kind of recommend to people just stop at the second book. But
I hear much the same, and he did go on to write 2 more sequels after that, both of which I understand are just roundly dismissed. I fully agree actually with everything you just said. I mean, and sometimes it is better not to research the writers too deeply. But although in this book, what I noticed is that while I think that he part of the solution is reminiscent of the kind of Velikovskyist notions of the solar system, he worked that into his story in a way that actually did kind of make it work with the scientifically, unraveled conclusion to the mystery that his characters came up with. Like within the context of his story, he actually made that kind of outlandish solution something I could suspend disbelief for, like within the context. I don't know that I would have, it was kind of a hat trick. He sort of did it. Like when you find out everything about, the secret of like, well, how could they do this if this was happening and if they were there? And he kind of like did it. And I could believe it in the story.
Well, really quickly, for those people who haven't read the story, can you give us a quick summary of what it's about?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, here we are just yammering along and just didn't even get into that bit, did we? All right. So they find, like, here we are on the moon and we found this dead dude, and they date the body back like 50,000 years, which is obviously before any known human civilization. And so what, and the part of, and when I'm mentioning like the bits that were reminiscent to me of, say, 2001, I'm talking about like little moments. For example, when
Wait, what about the story, the synopsis though?
Like, okay, you're right. Don't let the ADHD brain get distracted.
Hanging around.
Yeah, like I have a Velikovsky brain. It just bounces all over the solar system. Now, so so naturally they have this interesting mystery with the age of the body, which seems to actually make no sense. And so they ship the body back to Earth, and they're examining it and going through in detail the personal effects that they find. They get entire teams of people, like linguists, biologists, what have you. Little factions develop. You have like the evolutionary biologist guy is very strident in his views about the origins of what this astronaut might have been, because from for all biological evidence indicates that this is a Homo sapien, right? But if he's 50,000 years old on the moon in a spaceship, he couldn't. It's saying biology insists, evolutionary biology, it would, says he cannot have, evolution. You can't find like two different species in two entirely different environments and like become the same species. Every species that evolves is going to be unique to its environment and the selection pressures and what have you. So you can't get like another Earth or another world and just have like human aliens, right? You all, I guess, anywhere you live other than Earth, you're going to get like a Star Trek Klingon forehead or something weird, but you're never going to be 100% human. But this body is human. And then as translations and research into the DNA and whatever are happening, and the characters, this is the kind of hard science fiction where the characters just don't really matter as characters. They exist to kind of like deliver the scientific ideas. Yet another discovery is made on the moon Ganymede around Jupiter.
Spoilers.
Oh, yes. What am I? Well, there's another discovery made on Jupiter, which seems to tie into this, but it couldn't because it is evidence of something even older. And so long story short, the story becomes, tracing this astronaut, how he got there, how he might link to whatever was discovered on Jupiter. And it ultimately kind of wraps up in this kind of our own place in the universe thing. So it is a tale of human origins. How did I do? Did I ruin everything? Or
no, you did great. Okay. No.
Yeah. So it's so in that regard, it is a terrific hard science story in that it's a detective story. It's a huge, sort of, we found this mystery, let's unravel it. And it is done in this way that, as I mentioned, does kind of feel like you're reading a nonfiction book about an event that occurred. And it's, and it is, there is that kind of maybe just naivete about it that is charming. It has dated elements. For example, like it's this, the science world is this very kind of male dominated world, right? So that would have been a product of its time. Although I did kind of find it was amusing, like the one kind of breakthrough that was made in the translation, where they're trying to figure out, they've got all this, like they've got this table of symbols that they can't really decipher. And it's could it be, a lunar charts, or could it be this, or could it be that, or could it be like a periodic table of the elements? And I think like someone's, female personal assistant walks in the room and says, "Oh, that's a calendar." Said, you guys have been saying that this document is a diary. I've never seen a diary without a calendar. Maybe that's a calendar. And they're just sort of like, ah. So he throws in little bits like that. And I thought, well, that's cute, so there are these little human moments, even though it is this, I won't say dry, but it is this very like science text, I think that there were poignant moments, like when he, the scene later on where he like reads fully the fully translated diary of the dead astronaut. And, there's some poignance to that, just kind of learning of his fate. So I think, for, early Hogan, I think, it's, if you're going to ever read the guy, this would be a one to pick up. And I agree with you. And everything that you said about, the unraveling of, just how it presents a scientific mystery dramatically. I completely agree.
Well, I'm glad you didn't absolutely hate it. It is a lot of science, I think. But I'm really excited. I was definitely very interested in hearing your review, if you're going to do any reviews on any of these books and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so.
I might do an SFF180 retro on this one because I think it's worth it. I mean, I'm writing the written version of the review for my website, and then the more I look at it, I'll go, I think I will, because I think this one is interesting. It's interesting to me how I found out like these original Del Rey editions are kind of hard to get and kind of starting to get, for whatever reason, sort of pricey on the collector's market. There was some 2000, I guess the 2000, 2001, the little flecks of reminiscence that I had were just, they were tiny details. Like when the guy like just goes to the moon for the first time, the main character, and he just lands and he sees all of the work that's going on there, and just kind of reminded me of all that landing on the moon base and just bits. And you're just basically seeing effects, right? You're just seeing spaceships and tech toys, and it's all just, it's spacey tech porn. And that was kind of fun of it. So, but yeah, so great recommendation. And thank you for getting me. So, all right. Your turn.
All right. Well, I guess the next recommendation was a book that I had never heard of. And it was George, I'm going to say his last name wrong,
Effinger. George Alec Effinger, yeah.
Effinger's
Mhm.
When Gravity Fails, which,
Yes.
as it turns out, is the first in a series, a big
Mhm.
series actually, that is like a very interesting kind of cyberpunk vibe story.
Mhm. Yeah, it doesn't
Um,
get too heavy into it, right? Yeah.
it's very, it kind of is a lot of like
Yeah.
VR and everything. It has all the main markers of cyberpunk, I think.
Mhm.
Although it was kind of early for its time, I suppose, but
Mhm.
um, and I don't know. I was really surprised because we definitely get that gritty underbelly, seedy part of the city. Who, we have all of these hackers and all that kind of stuff in a world that seems to have conquered and squashed Christianity. So everything is based off of Muslim,
Mhm.
a Muslim world.
Mhm.
But we still very much see how the crime aspects of the culture and the cities and everything are very much what we know and understand. There's still prostitution, there's still lots of crime rings, there's still a lot of stuff that are happening.
Mhm.
And I think the most interesting aspect of this book in particular was um, the the representation of the rise of the Muslim
Mhm.
aspect to the story, because that's not something that at least us in the Western world usually even think about. And I found that to be really incredibly interesting, a very diverse perspective, something that I had definitely never encountered before. And the more that I looked up this book, I think it was a nominee for the Hugo Awards the year it came out.
I believe so. Yeah, I'd have to look up to confirm, but you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very well received. Time.
Well,
So.
I was really surprised because I had never heard of it. When
Mhm.
you look up like cyberpunk books, it never comes up. And
Yeah.
I was just really surprised because for me, this was like one of those like obscure books that I would
Mhm.
not have read or even known about if you hadn't brought it to my attention.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to kind of do that because I was also curious to see just what you would think of it generally, because I know that you can be hot and cold on cyberpunk as a genre. You're
Yep.
not entirely sold on it. And I
Yep.
wanted to maybe like, well, show you something that would be a little bit off that, like kind of adjacent to it, but a different take on it. And then I wanted to hear what your impressions were of it.
Well, like I said, I thought the world was really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't know. I feel I gave it a 3 star is what I
Mm-hmm.
did.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the world. I'm really glad I read it. It's not a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I think I'm one of those people where I just can't. I don't love the super seedy crime underbelly world unless we
Mm-hmm.
have like a reason or a story or a moral or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt like this book did quite build up the main character, but it very much to me felt like a prologue. We didn't get really into the deepest aspect of the plot until like
Mm-hmm.
the very end of the book. And it's
Mm-hmm.
very clear that he is planning a second book,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which isn't a bad thing. There's tons of series out there that do it. But that makes it really difficult to like judge whether or not this would be something that I would super love without having read
Right.
the second book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, but no, that's perfectly valid. But but I was just curious I wanted to just hear your general impressions, and it's like that's really cool. So, very nice. So a 3 star for you, decent read. More interesting world perhaps than narrative. You would say,
Yeah.
okay,
But
and
that's not necessarily a bad thing. I
no,
don't encounter those altering perspectives and like immediately love them often. Sometimes
hmm
it takes time for that to seep in and me to love it.
yeah, no, I get that, and I do agree with you that it is, and I think it very quickly became like a cyberpunk cliche to set everything and maybe like these dark and grim and gritty, kind of crime-ridden future worlds and what have you. And that's still kind of going on today with some cyberpunk. Like I remember, I really got into once they fixed it, I was really enjoying playing this video game, Cyberpunk 2077. But I consistently had a problem because I just got really tired of the cliches with all the world. Like everything is just, there's dirt and trash everywhere. I mean, we're living in this future where even like the homeless people have prosthetic, like bionic arms, but nobody seems to remember what a broom is, right? So there's just trash everywhere, and everything's crime, and and every business seems to be like some kind of like sexually oriented business or something like a. So it seems so it can just kind of rub your face in that. I'm like, good grief, all right, give it a rest. I mean, surely there's like people have normal, like just let me go to a sushi restaurant where someone isn't dancing on the table, right? But that being said, it can be fun if you're in the mood for it. So, well, thanks for good. I'm glad you read that. Gave it a shot, different sort of thing. And before I go into my next one, and I don't want to digress. Well, go ahead, Whitney.
Well, I just wanted to ask, have you read the rest of the series? Are you complete in the series?
No, I did not actually complete the trilogy, and I would like to. And
I think there's four.
So the Exile Kiss and
let me look it up.
Yeah. Anyway.
Nope, we're both wrong. There's 5.
Really? Okay.
Although it looks like a couple of them might have been short stories or something.
Oh, they may have been, because I think he might have launched that future with a short story and then expanded it and then maybe done another. Well, anyway.
I wish they labeled those better.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, you have to like if you're on ISFDB, you have to look really close because it'll say like SF, which will trick you because you'll think it means science fiction, but they actually mean no, that's short fiction instead of a novel. But anyway, cool. So not to digress too much because I know we're sort of on a time frame, but you talked really quickly about the interesting kind of development of the Islamic future as opposed to like the Christian centric future. And didn't you say that you were getting ready to read, or that you had just read The Years of Rice and Salt, getting back to Kim Stanley Robinson?
I haven't read it, but I was planning on reading it, only I got derailed because I had to read this one.
Had that one. Okay. Well, I really want to hear what you have to say about Years of Rice and Salt, because that is, okay, it's a KSR epic, but it's an alternate history. And it is the premise of it, which you probably, you're up on, but it's, it takes place in a world where the Black Plague in medieval Europe didn't just kill like a quarter of the population; it killed off like 80%, and so I like completely derailed the development of Christianity and Catholicism, and so then Islam became the dominant like religious political practice, and then it presents us with that world. So,
well, that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, So yeah, well, I do want to see what you have to say about that when that gets all said and done.
Yes. Well, when I get around to getting that one, I'm hoping I have a couple others that have to get read first, but I am hoping to get to that one. Okay. I also wanted to mention in the comment section, somebody's bringing up, Titanium Noir, which I read recently. I don't know what it is, but cyberpunk books are very hit and miss for me because I love the aesthetic. I love the movies that are cyberpunk, but I don't always love the books, which is one of the things I'm struggling with, and I don't know why. But what I can tell you is I love Titanium Noir. Like, it was awesome. I do recommend it. I think it was because they spent less time at super describing the world and letting you imagine it, and more time on developing like some of the characters and the mystery. And it's a murder mystery book, so I really liked it.
Well, it is 100% on my list because I like Nick Harkaway. And so that's, the son of Jean Le Carré, by the way, the famous spy writer. So, yeah, so that's cool. All righty then. Well, if I may, I will go into my next one, which you hardly recommended, which is All You Need Is Kill.
Yay!
And let me tell you, this book, I don't want to confess to like maybe any sort of, well, I want some bias or what have you, but like I told you that I saw the film, and this is, but this I think was either simultaneous. It started out as what the Japanese call a light novel. They have a lot of these. It's actually kind of a
Well, so give us a summary and tell us what we were talking about. But
yeah, so basically, humanity is at war with this alien race called the Mimics, and we see we have a point of view character is this soldier named Kieji, right? And what happens is that he's in a big battle where they are really getting it handed to them, and he dies. But then after dying, he kind of wakes up, and it is once again the morning of the battle. Mm-hmm. And so he is essentially stuck in this kind of Groundhog Day time loop. Can't quite figure it out. And in the process of telling this story, he meets this other soldier who kind of experienced the same thing. And she's Emily Blunt in the movie, but her name is Rita. And they call her Full Metal Bitch, because she walks around in like the power armor and she prefers this like giant melee weapon or something. And kind of together they find out that it is something to do with I don't want to give too much away, but the biology of the Mimics is what has what has caused him to get kind of stuck in this time loop at this particular moment. It's just the way the encounter that he had with the enemy. And so one thing that happens, of course, is just like kind of reloading a previous save from a video game. He is improving his skills each time more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And again, not to give away too much, but we do in the brief, because it is as short as it is, it reads like lightning. Mm-hmm. And that was one thing that I thought, yeah, that really works, because a story like this kind of needs to do this. Mm-hmm. It needs to just get in and just drop you into it and just keep you hooked with the action and suspense. But yarfy little yarfy puppies. I love puppy yarfing. Sorry, just but even though with the novel's brevity, we developed this really the connection to these characters, and the ending gives you a sad which, not to give it away, but I enjoyed this far more, I have to be honest, than I was expecting, because I looked at it and you see, of course, there's a very manga style of the cover art, and of course there is also a manga of this that was produced, I think, very shortly after, it was adapted by another artist, another writer, and then there was an American comic adaptation also of this story that was written by a guy named Nick Mamatas.
Well, more importantly, remember, it was also the inspiration for
Tom Cruise Edge of Tomorrow, which we talked about the movie version, a lot in our original video too. Mm-hmm. Very underrated movie. When it came out, didn't really do much at the box office. I don't know if people were having Tom Cruise fatigue from all of his shenanigans at the time, but there was also, we talked about this in the first video. We didn't think it was well promoted. I griped about the title a whole lot, but it is. But as a movie, it's terrific. And I just noticed it's on Netflix right now. If you've never seen it, go watch it. It is apparently in like their top 5 of movies right now. So I think it's having one of those Netflix Second Life things that some movies theatrically that didn't do terribly well have been able to enjoy. So, Live Die Repeat. Live Die Repeat was what Boxtopus should have actually been the title, because it was the movie tagline. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that would have been a much like snappier movie title, mm-hmm. because it also tells you what you need to know. But anyway,
you liked it.
Yeah, right? No, I liked it. Yes, I really did. I liked it because it sort of defied my expectations. I thought this is the kind of thing I can see myself enjoying as a movie, but as a read, I might find it just a little bit too shallow and fluffy, and maybe even like no, it was just right for what it needed to be, And so I'm very happy that I finally just kind of broke through my little wall of stubbornness and got into it. So,
I'm
appreciate
really glad.
that, Whitney. Yes.
Yeah, I was so surprised. I read that on the plane over to Scotland, actually, like in one sitting, and I like laughed out loud. I cried. Everything. And that ending is so different than what I expected it to be.
Yeah, the movie changes the ending drastically. So if it really was.
Man, I really had to like reread it to make sure I really understood what was happening, but I thought it was very clever.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable read. So very, very pleased to see that. So, George, thank you so much for the generosity and the support. Appreciate that very much. But let's just say, we do not speak of Tom Cruise's The Mummy. We do not. There we are. Just got that out there. That's clear. Okay, Whit. Let's. So, last book for each of us. What you got?
All right. Well, I don't know how much you want me to talk about this book. I really am hesitant to tell you about it. So the last book that I was assigned was the book that hasn't come out yet, and that is Neal Stephenson's new book called Polostan.
Okay.
So I had to read it on my Kindle, and you were so kind in providing that ebook. This is the only second ever ebook I have ever read on a Kindle, by the way.
Okay.
So that's kind of a big deal for me. I haven't decided whether or not I'm an ebook reader yet. Sorry about that.
No, well, she's just being like, yeah, I agree, Mom. I hate ebooks.
Yeah, he's literally standing in front of the mirror, barking at himself. I just want to point this out. Anyway,
that is like the ultimate puppy behavior. Yeah.
He's something special, that's for sure. Anyway, so this book I was so excited to pick up because I've read a lot of Neal Stephenson, but not tons. So I really wanted to check out something by him. And I have to say, fundamentally, initially, I was very disappointed with this book because I was hoping that it was a science fiction book, and it's not. And that made me really mad. And I was very upset because I thought this was a science fiction book, and it's not. It is very much a historical fiction book. It follows a particular female character who goes by 3 different names in the book through her growing up during the rise of communism, both in Russia, and then she moves to the States. It's a very weirdly structured story because there's a lot of flashbacks between her and her past, and you have to pay attention and keep track of the names that she's using, which will indicate to you she's using the name Dawn in the United States, and she uses the name Aurora in Russia. And then her future self uses a different name called Katya. I don't think that's a spoiler. I think it's just names. So, but it starts getting, in my opinion, this book was such a slog because I was expecting science fiction and didn't get it. I don't really have any interest in history during this time period, and I don't think Neal Stephenson did a good job making me care about it. I felt like she spent a long time trying to explain her motivations of her past in dire situations where I felt like she was way too detailed. There is a chapter in the book. It's actually the longest chapter of the book. It goes on forever. And she literally describes every detail of a carnival that took place in Michigan in the it's like 60s or 70s or something. And I 100% didn't care. I hated it, and I was like, I need this situation to stop. I need it to stop. I hate it. I even texted you.
Please, no more. Please, God.
Where is the science fiction? I don't understand. I was so upset about it.
Well, did you find that it had any, like, just mostly being a historical, did you find that it had, like, any speculative elements at all?
Not even a little bit. I know that he's setting up because this is very obviously the first of a trilogy, and he set up the ending that way too, so you're not going to get the conclusion out of it. He is such a good writer that when I finally started hate reading it at the end, he does help perpetuate you through the story, but I just didn't love this character. I didn't love this time. I didn't want to read historical fiction. Where's the science? Where's the aliens and the spaceships? And
yeah, I get it. I get it.
I was sort of hoping that he would secretly turn it into like an alternate history of some kind. But this character goes through so much trauma. She goes through so many events in her life that it becomes unbelievable. For me, that was one of the biggest elements that took me out of the story. It's like you're being tortured and you're talking to me about this carnival situation that you had in your past, and you won't shut up about the carnival. And I don't understand why you would talk this long about carnival in the middle of being tortured. I just about it.
Yeah, well, that is all entirely fair, and so yeah.
I'm so sorry. I hope you enjoy it. I know you started it, but
well, now here's the thing. I mean, it's sometimes when I hear like an absolute, like just lame book like this, that actually makes me some more intrigued. I have this weird perverse thing of really enjoying, like, anticipating books that everyone else says are really bad. I just because it's like, oh wow, now I have to. I don't know what it is. It's just something in my mind makes me be like, oh, okay, now I've just got to check this out now. But no, I completely think that no, everything you said is totally valid. Yes, I can understand maybe like the frustrated expectations, because granted, this is why you always have to like fact check everything, I guess. But what I had initially been sort of like, I exposed to.
Was it marketed as Seven Eve's sequel?
It wasn't marketed as that. I think that maybe was just like something that kind of came to life on Reddit. People were someone says just like, yeah, I guess because everyone is kind of hoping and anticipating that, because there's more of that story to tell. And so someone was just like, yeah, I think this is and just that just kind of took off on its own. But that was not really anything in the way of the formal, publicity for the book, which I didn't really hear much of at all until like it got closer to release. Now I've closer to release, and I've now started about 2 chapters in, so I've haven't really gotten into any of the meat of it. So, but I am curious to finish it now. But when I did find out that it was going to be more of a historical, I was thinking, okay, but maybe it'll be like the Baroque cycle, right, where it is that kind of history of Newton and Leibniz and back in the day, but then there is this kind of interesting, the speculative element where he ties it into like Cryptonomicon, and you have his recurring character of Enoch Root, who just sort of pops up every once in a while, like some kind of like time traveling vagabond to comment on things. And so I was hoping it might be more like that. Evidently it isn't, but like I said, there's going to be a book 2 and 3 at the very least. So, if he doesn't put off too many people with what he's done here, we'll see. But at least it wasn't one of his, 1,000-page door stoppers, right? It's kind of a normal sized book. And
yeah, it is a normal sized book. Very colorful cover. Again, I think it would have been different if I had at least like known going into it that this isn't going to be a speculative fiction and alternate history. It's not a secret science fiction novel. But I'm still going to stand by this particular era of history is just not
your thing,
not my vibe.
That's cool.
And I'm gonna stand by the fact that I did not find this character ultra believable. I don't know. I feel really bad about it because at the very end he has like a little author's note. This is not a spoiler because it's just a note about apparently he's been wanting to write this book for a very long time, and he's put it off by writing a lot of the other books that they thought would sell better.
Okay.
And so this was one of those books that he really, really wanted to write. So it seems like it's a passion project of his, and I'm like, please stop.
Yeah.
So I feel really bad saying that, but I also really strongly had a negative opinion of this book.
No, well, that's fine. Maybe not all passion projects are the kind of thing that actually have an audience. That's why they're passion projects. But I'm glad you read it and gave it a shot and gave your honest opinion. And so, like I said, I've only just started it, so I'm curious to finish it and then we'll have future chats about it. But at least now everyone watching this knows, don't expect science fiction if you go into it. Don't expect Snow Crash or anything like that. So at least they'll be forewarned. So okay.
Well, when you finish it, you better text me or call me because we have ending spoily chats to
we will.
So,
that will be a thing that will happen. So okay. All right. So last one for Thomas, and this is one again I've been looking forward to reading for some time, and so you finally just got me out of my grind and into it. So this is A Generation Ship by Michael Mammay. And I think you probably recommended this to me because you know that I'm planning a themed video on like the whole premise of this. And I had mentioned that I did want to maybe like lead into it with some newer books in this little subgenre, and then my video will be talking about like older ones. Mm-hmm. And so thanks for kind of getting me off my duff and getting me into this. So now I have notes. I didn't find it a perfect book, but it was certainly a departure from Michael Mammay. It's very different from his other like military SFs. And I do think that he does interesting things with the generation ship premise. And also, I think very much tying it into being this kind of parable about, I think, our modern day politics. I think when it does do some things that I think are quite excellent. It's nearly 600 pages, and I do think it's overlong at that length. I do think it could have been tightened up, but considering the length, it moves very briskly. We essentially are on a massive ship called Voyager, and it is approaching a world called Promissa.
Wait, just out of random noting, thank you to Michael Mammay for not naming this book Voyager. Just saying.
Yeah, very much. Although Generation Ship has an intriguingly kind of generic quality to it, which at the same time doesn't feel lazy. I think I think it just kind of sums up, like, yeah. But we follow essentially 5 viewpoint characters. And what we have is this vessel, which has been traveling for just about over 250 years. And it is finally approaching this world. Now, what's interesting is that we don't know at first why it has become necessary to do this massive colonization effort. We can assume that there's always some reason why people have to flee Earth in their thousands, right? But what we have developed on this ship is a full society with, hierarchies of rule, and then there's, cops that everyone hates, and there's organized crime, and there's, just people trying to live their lives, and what is happening as the ship is approaching the world, and they're getting very close. People are now starting to chafe against the rules, and I had to think about this. But when I worked out the time frame, if we're looking at 250 years, we're maybe looking at, say, 5 to 6 generations, maybe, from just given lifespans. But there are basically 2 things that were, and this I loved, because they always go back to, well, this was in the original charter, and it always made me think of people who are like today, right, when they're talking about their rights for one thing or another, they're always like, well, the founding fathers said this, right, and so this is how things have to be. And I thought he was kind of riffing on that attitude, that in a kind of a satirical way. But 2 rules were essentially set into place that have become these inviolable rules. First off is that you are assigned, kind of almost more like a communist country, really. You're assigned your division, your work division, where you work. And, what like department of the ship you're in, whether it's, just kind of agriculture or, this or that, just communications, biology, what have you, right? And you can transfer departments, but it's a massive pain in the ass. And very few people get to do that. And then the other rule is this kind of, like Ballad of Narayama situation where when you're 75, they throw you a nice big fat birthday party, and then they euthanize you and recycle you because we have to kind of turn it over. And this is a thing that people have just kind of been going with, for most of the voyage. I guess the initial people who signed up for this kind of understood what the deal was and accepted the rules. And, and they understood, look, this is for the good of the whole community. We're all in this together, blah, blah, blah. The security of the ship is all, and that's another thing. It's like, we're just in this tin can in space. And so what is happening now, we're getting close to the world, and something curious is happening in that multiple probes are being sent out, and they're all malfunctioning. But one of our characters is kind of told, well, keep this quiet. But the information is leaked, and then this starts to cause what we start seeing is the social unrest that is now that I guess has probably been building up for decades. Is now kind of coming to a head because people are like, look, we're getting towards the end of the voyage now. I don't see why anybody has to do this anymore. There is this really kind of unpleasant situation where this old lady doesn't show up for recycling day and refuses, and security officers are sent to go fetch her, and and a lot of her neighbors are just sort of like, leave her alone, right? And it turns into this whole kind of ACAB situation. And in the resulting melee, like the security guy is trying to sort of subdue this woman and bring her down, where she needs to be. And he uses his stun gun on her. And because of her age, it actually kills her. And then this creates a massive, like, oh shit situation, which the governor then, now we get into the politics of it, decides he has to spin a certain way. So it's all talking about so many things. There are so many parallels, right? I mean, this whole novel is really just a commentary on just how things are done in our culture, how, media is shaped to, satisfy agendas and what have you. And so in order to kind of quell this unrest, they decide on something that I think is massively foolish, which is this kind of just mass exodus onto the planet. Right. Whereas originally they were going to, the cooler heads on board ship were saying, well, we need, they're saying we need to maybe postpone actual colonization, get in orbit around the world, but it should take as many as 20 years to get everybody down on the surface if that's what has to happen. And but that doesn't actually happen. And then things, there's a result from that. So long story short, it's about kind of how this society just is kind of comes undone through dumb decision making. And I have read some of the more I think negative leaning reviews of the book that I was reading kind of in the course of reading the book itself. They didn't like that bit. I think there are the science fiction readers who sort of expect characters to be rational actors were very frustrated about it, because what you have are characters just sort of, and I will agree that this is a structural issue with the book, that every chapter is a character kind of finding out, all right, well, here's what just happened. And then they kind of have to make a decision. And then the decision is always going to end up being the wrong one that makes something else bad happen. And then the next character has to, there's kind of like a rhythm to that, it's all characters kind of reacting to things and then making a choice based on that. And then that goes wrong. And then another character reacts to it and sort of lather, rinse, repeat. But for the most part, though, I kind of feel like that whole frustration with people making dumb decisions, when if you weren't so dumb, you would realize that, hey, if like the ship, if anything happens, we're dead, right? Like this could affect all of us. We all at a certain point, we've got to come together because we're in a tin can in space, right? This is our world. And I think some readers have been like, I can't believe the characters are so stupid. But then I look around us, right? And people, I mean, what do we see in our lives? Just people in charge making dumb decisions that create chaotic results, and create war and strife and small-minded people at the top just kind of acting in their own interests. And I think it's a real reflection of kind of, human nature, at the times that we really need to step up and do the right thing, which I think let me put it this way. Ideologically, it is very much the opposite of Inherit the Stars, right? Because Inherit the Stars is everybody comes together to solve the mystery and do the good thing, right? And this is not. This is everybody's, just an asshole, right?
What do you think of the end, though? Because the end is not about politics at all.
Yes. Well, the end was, I'm still sort of formulating my thoughts on the end. I do think that what was interesting was, how, the majority of the book is on the ship. And I think that was, but the book is not really so much about the colonization of the world as it is about, just how the society now needs to kind of sustain itself and the things that happen and the unintended consequences of just how societies do what they do. And certain things are set in motion that, don't quite conform to the plan, right? The original founders, well, too bad. It's like, they're not here anymore, right? We have to live in the here and now. But then the ending kind of, it's interesting. I think there's kind of an abruptness to it, but I do think that I have a feeling the more that I think about it, And I'll probably go back and reread some passages. There's some bits in the middle that I want to reread, and I kind of liked it. I mean, I did, you know, I think I'm warming to it because it is one that's kind of like, oh, right. And then you're like, you know, but I think I'm liking it. I think the more I think about it, and I'm like, that's actually really cool. So, again, can't really be spoilery, but let's just say that the world itself is not what they were expecting. Because, you know, they had all these great kind of readouts. They're strictly looking at things like planetary and atmospheric conditions, and the oxygen's just right, and our odds of survival have just gone up from 97% to 99%, and they just I think are just kind of expecting the planet itself to be a cakewalk, and then it isn't, and so not, at least not so much, and it's unexpected. So that's all I will say. But I think ultimately I do like this book. I just think it has just, it's one of those where you can nitpick this or that. I think I'm probably ultimately settling on like a good solid 3.5 for it, but I do like it. And I like that it was a departure for him and a good attempt at, like, you know, the sort of epic storytelling. I wouldn't compare it to, you know, anything. I think he's trying to write in that realm of maybe like guys like Reynolds and Hamilton, but he's not trying to be them. He's trying to tell his own story, epic science fiction tale, you know, of that caliber, you might say, but he's doing it his own way. I don't think he's trying to follow in the lines of like anyone else who is known for their epic science fiction, and kind of keep his own voice with it. So I did enjoy it very much, and I'm glad that I finally got around to reading it. So.
But, well, I definitely, I guess, had a different perspective on this book. Well, politics were definitely a particular element of it. I really found this book to be mostly about sociology and how anticipation kind of brings about some significant social change on the trip. How, like, coming closer and closer to the planet, you know, the old woman who didn't want to show up, she wanted, you know, they only had 6 months left. She wanted to see the planet, like, because they've been waiting for so long, you know.
Yeah, all her life. I mean, yeah.
And then how that kind of becomes social change. And we get that point of view of a politician, but we also have a bunch of characters who are working against the politician in trying to reveal the truth and what's happening. And then we have the scientists who have all the facts, but then they don't really understand the ramifications of the sociology and how you do have to just, you have to give it a spin, because you can't just state the facts and let everyone interpret themselves. And I thought it was a really well balanced book for myself. I think anybody who critiques that this didn't make sense hasn't paid attention to the election ever.
Yes, ever. So yeah.
I don't think it makes sense to, I guess, fault it for not making sense, because we've been trying to get people to vote in their own interests for like maybe a couple generations now. So I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. I don't give credence to any of those reviews personally.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that was, again, Mammay's point, right? People work at cross purposes. Yeah. So often you work at cross purposes, even though you may have the same end goal, your way of kind of seeing the path there isn't going to be the same, even remotely. And then, yes, there are people, thanks to like spin, propaganda, how people are just sort of conditioned to think about things, they will act against their own self-interests, even though it defies all rationality to do it. And, you know, maybe it's just that particular brand of science fiction reader, like, say, who wants everyone to be Jim Hogan characters who are just rational all the time. People aren't like that, and people are messy. And I think that was really a whole lot of Mammay's theme here.
Well, I agree. I found the ending to be probably the weakest part of the book. I think he promised his, at least this is my interpretation, so I don't know this, but my interpretation is that he promised a standalone, which I really appreciate a standalone, but he promised a standalone, and then he got to a point where he probably got about, I'm going to say he got 85% of the way done with the book. He's like, I like it as is. And then he's like, oh crap, I need to end this. So then he like really sped up the ending. And I felt like it was a little bit cheapened by.
It was abrupt, yeah.
Very much like speeding up the end, where I feel like if he had just ended it where he wanted to, and then had a second book, I think he would have been able to do a lot more interesting things with this story. And I probably would have gotten the second one because it was my best book of the year, I think last year, or very close to it. It was my most favorite new release. I really thought he did a really good job of getting across his point. I thought he really grew as an author, and I was already a fan of his previous work. So I don't know. I'm sad that this book didn't end up being at least on the ballot of nominations for the Hugos. That was one of my hopes for last year, because it has a lot to say, even if it had a little bit of a poor ending. I mean, you could say the same thing about many of the other winners. I just finished Franz Lieber's The Wanderer. Enough said.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I think the part about the ending that I did, think was cool was that, once again, they have all of their, best laid plans, right? Even though they're all arguing and they're all complaining, but then didn't realize, nobody took into account that the planet may have its own ideas about, these strangers showing up. And I did kind of like that, it's like kind of the ultimate sort of, pulling the football away sort of a situation. Again, not getting into too much detail about it to be spoilery, but yeah, I do agree that it was abrupt. I haven't read or heard anything, if Mammay is actually going to do a sequel to it, because
I don't think he is. I think it's a standalone.
Yeah, because the impression that I always got that it was intended as a standalone, in which case, yeah, I agree with you. Maybe tightening up some of the midsection, because some of that can get a bit repetitive, and then giving a bit more meat to the final section, the final chapters, and when they're at the worlds, probably would have helped things a lot better. But on the whole, yeah, I do agree with you. I think this is a book that had some good ideas in its head, and was well executed for the most part. And I think if you like these kinds of space tales, you'll find a lot to like in it. It is, despite the length, it is briskly readable. It takes a bit of time to kind of find the characters distinctive, for them to kind of grow their own voice a little bit. My favorite would probably have been the hacker, because I think
my favorite was the hacker too.
Yeah, because she I think very well has a good distinctive personality right from jump. Whereas I feel like, the evil governor is kind of like Mr. Tropey evil governor guy. And, but I also liked the Janos, who is this farmer who is generally, he works in the agricultural department. He's kind of my age, a little younger, and he's, got a grown daughter, and he just kind of wants to do his thing. He's sort of apolitical personally, but he kind of gets, shoved into, hey, his boss says, I want you to go to these protest meetings just to see what they're all about. Just because I don't want them to, any of this to kind of mess us up on our, work schedules and our, because it could have an effect on us. He's like, oh, boss, I don't want to go. It's like, no, go ahead and go. So he goes, right, because he's a, good worker. But he ends up getting kind of swept into, he gets pulled against his will into the full heart of the politics thing, and ends up becoming just coming out of his shell and being more of a major player in it than he would have ever intended. Would not even have been in his personality to do it, but his daughter really encourages him. She's like, come on, you're a farmer. Farmers get things done. So you're a man who can do this. You got to believe in yourself. And so he kind of he's a guy who has, I think, a really good arc, because he steps up. Right. So it takes a while. I can see, people thinking if it takes a while for the characters to kind of, come into themselves as characters. I think I've ultimately found, the development to be satisfying and believable. I believed the people in the story at the end of the day. So good read, and thank you so much for kind of getting me off my duff to read it. Very, very happy I did. So yeah, and it's now really kind of got me back into my generation ship jam now to knock out a few more of these. Yeah, I think I'm gonna probably jump into Breaking Day here really soon, because that's another one that is and then there's yet another more recent one. I can't quite remember the title yet, and then get into my classics, because I'm very much excited about that video that I've talked to you about too much, and you want me to shut up about it and go ahead and make it, so I will do that. But this was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think it was a success to kind of take over each other's TBRs and kind of give books that we wouldn't have picked up otherwise, potentially, at least on my side.
Out of our comfort zones, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, we can, I guess in the future, at some point, we can think about doing this again. We can think about maybe doing some variation on it or doing something entirely different, whatever our imagines. You are the ideal woman. You're like, guys, I'm not kidding. Like she said, well, we were sitting down just having lunch at Worldcon and she whips out this notebook and just starts like, I mean, she's like, you know, just this, I'm so just like not into organization. And Whitney's like, and boy, okay. And like throws out dozens of these amazing ideas that I couldn't have thought of in a million years. So you are the pro at that, I will say. But yeah, it's yeah, but I'm not at the same time putting it all on your shoulders. I'll try to come up with some things too, but I have a feeling that if we want to come up with future video, little collab ideas, you'll surprise me, which I enjoy. So
yeah.
But this was fun, and I would like to do this again at some point. And
yeah, well, we'll have to see when we have more room in our TBRs to do. And when we come up with a better list, we can always think about inviting Rachel, even though she'll have read it by the time the videos are done.
Yeah. She'll be like, oh, you want me to read that book? Okay, hang on.
Oh, wait, it's
interesting. Done. Okay, yeah, nice. What's next? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to each assign her 3 books to
there we go. Yeah, because it's time we read 2, you will have knocked out 12. So there we go. I want to just like bottle her brain and figure out how but that's fine. Anyway, like I said, comparison is the thief of joy, right? We can always be like, oh, if I only read as much as we take in what the books that we do, and we enjoy the experience, and we get out of it, our enjoyment, and it's all good. It's all, it's all about the love of the story, right? So, where are the trains? George wants to know. I actually muted myself when one went by because it would have drowned Whitney out, and that would have been impolite. So, otherwise, all right. Well, thanks for doing this, Whitney, and it's an early morning one, but thanks to all of you guys for showing up. And you and I will be talking very soon again and all of that. And otherwise,
if you can, definitely send this video out or like and subscribe. And Thomas is always super awesome. So we'll definitely do more if people want to see more.
We will. And my Worldcon video vlog, yes, which I've been promising forever. I'm still kind of in the slow process of editing it, sort of putting it tightly together. But I was walking around with all my like nerdy new camera setup, and I am very pleased with how it looks. So I'm excited for you guys to see it. So I'll try to get that editing completed this week. But otherwise, thank you all so much. Thank you, Whitney. If you're not subscribing to Whitney yet, go do that because she is amazing and does terrific content. So you will enjoy her channel, Secret Sauce of Storycraft. And so until I see all of the rest of you next time, stay safe, healthy, and happy reading. And we will see you again really soon. Okay? Wave. Bye, everyone. Okay, well, thanks, Winnie. I think we're off, I believe.